your sentencing day comes up, you get sentenced to 50 to life. What goes through your mind when that verdict comes down?
What's crazy is that I knew that I was gonna get convicted, right? First of all, after my trial, because the jury had they brought me down because the jury had a question, and the jury was trying to find out what's the difference between first-degree murder and second-degree murder. And at that point, I knew that they were just trying to figure out which one they was gonna hand down. So, from there, it was kind of fucked up. And I mean, I didn't get my day in court to where I'm like, wait, not guilty, kind of like how I did in my second trial. But then when I got sentenced to 50 to life, I had some new evidence that I found after, and that's what ultimately led me to after I got convicted about how, the police framed me, because I met a guy by the name of Oliver Barcenas. He was in the cell with me after I got convicted. He came from San Bruno to San Francisco. He was on to 850 Bryant on his way to the pen. And he was like, "Hey, your last name Truelove?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Man, I remember being at the police station like back in 06 or 07 or some shit like that." I'm like, "Oh yeah, for real." I'm like, "Oh, that's when my case happened." And he's like, "Yeah, I remember this Samoan girl coming in crying, and these two detectives, and come to find out he was at the police station at the exact same time everything had happened, and he remembered them saying Jamal Truelove. Are you sure it ain't Jamal Truelove?" Pointing at a picture, and the girl saying no.
Damn.
So then when we used him and then so what that shined a light on for me is the question that I had: why was my picture out of this 6-pack lineup the only picture that was brought up on the day that the crime actually happened, but everybody else's picture was dated 2 days later? So from what his testimony was, that picture was brought up on that day because they been had it on me, like trying to get me, as in if I did it. They didn't get her to say that I did it until 2 days later, when she ultimately said, "That looks like the person that could have shot Sale. Is that Jamal Truelove?" And then that's when they assured her, "Yes, that's Jamal." And then she said, "Yeah, I want to say it's him. I'm almost 100% sure." Like, bitch, you gotta be 100% sure. And there ain't no almost, there ain't no none of that. But that's why they never brought charges on me, because it was too tedious, right? It was, I don't know, it could be. But then once they got that other girl to say that I did it, and the police wrote it up as extremely credible, and they tweaked they little twerks and shit like that, ultimately, is why they got the warrant. But in my civil case, if I would have, thought about this in my criminal case, I probably wouldn't have never got convicted. But in my civil case, I asked the judge, I told my attorney to ask the judge, can we look at the original homicide file? Because there was already so much shit I discovered that the police did and was doing in general in between that whole time. So I asked for the original homicide file, and the judge granted it. And when you looked at the original homicide file, you seen that they was writing in pen, pencil, and marker. So the stuff that led to my innocence was like the trajectory of the bullet wounds. The trajectory of the bullet wounds didn't line up from her story. From her story, trajectory of the bullet wounds would have been from the left to the right, but they weren't. They was from the right to the left. And then when it comes down to the shell casings was supposed to be in the street, because 95% of guns are right-handed guns, and the hole where the shell cases come out is on the right-hand side, so it goes from the right into the rear. But the shell case is all the way up here in front and to the left, almost in a line. So when the autopsy lady gave her report to them, they wrote it down, but they seen that it was a mess up, so they erased it in pencil. They wrote it in pencil, erased it. And then when it come down to the ballistics, that they had wrote down, like it looks like it's in a line, basically, on some shit like that. They end up doodling. Doodling. Well, they said they were doodling, but they end up scratching it out, using a marker to bubble it in and put like a circle around it. And then they said that they was doodling. But then once you take the original and you look up in the light, you see exactly what they wrote, and you see exactly what they did. So once I was able to do that, I knew I had my case was, you know, a slam dunk. I planned on, that was like 2 weeks before the ending of my case. You know what I mean? I knew 2 weeks before I was winning my civil case, period. Now, I was confident going in. That just built my confidence even more. You know, so but if I would have had that in my criminal trial, they would have probably never granted it to me anyway. If I would have had that in my criminal trial, it would have been, you know, I would have never been convicted.
Let me ask you this. Do you think it was a situation where the cops were trying to get Jamal Truelove behind bars, or were they just trying to get another nigga in jail so they can close a case?
Well, I think closing the case to a degree, but at the same time, you know, I was somebody who was, you know, was known from where I'm from. I was good everywhere. And they didn't know what I was doing, you know. They didn't know if I was selling drugs. They didn't, you know, hear my name, you know, popping up like that. I didn't have no case. I didn't have no adult case, you know. And they knew I knew all the gangsters, all of everything. Like, I was in the streets, but I wasn't in the streets the way that these other niggas be in the streets, you know, all boastering and doing all of that shit like that. I got to the money. I got to the money. And I was, you know, I was the brains. I mean, look at me now. How did I get here without being the brains? You know, and I was always deemed as the golden child. You know, coming up, you know, with in my community and any other community that I pulled up in and fucked with the niggas over there. You know what I mean? Or went to school with. I was in juvenile hall with, or whatever it may be. I always had the master plan. You know, and if it come down to some street shit, or if it came down to some hitting the lick shit, like that was me.
Right now,
to answer your question, so I figured, you know, they were, you know, they hear my name. I wasn't the one that used to run when they pulled up. I mean, the jack niggas. Everybody else ran. I stood there all the time, you know, and shrugged my shoulders, and you know, they didn't like that, but. Ultimately, that helped me too, because later on, one of the head of the gang task force, when we was doing our what do they call, depositions, they try to pigeonhole me and see if and try to label me as a gang member. So they asked him. They said, "Would you say that Jamal Truelove was a gang member?" He said, "No. Jamal had what we call a player's pass. He was good everywhere. I didn't understand how he was good like that." And so with him, I don't think that they were trying to at that point, you know what I mean? But knowing that, you know, I was who I was, and my name kept on being, you know, spread around, you know, in people's mouths and shit like that, they was like, yeah, we got to make sure it goes on him, regardless of it being this other person, you know, that they was hearing about. They knew it was somebody else. But ultimately, they like, damn, ain't nobody saying it's him, though. We ain't got nobody saying that it's him, so we got to run with the people who saying that it's Jamal, and they were just looking to get a conviction.
Now, how was your time in prison? I think you did about 6 years. How was that? How rough was it for you?
No, it was rough being in jail just anyway, period, right? I was having a discussion with my nigga Illy, who's in jail right now. It was my celly. On the inside, you scared. You know what I mean? But you can't show that shit. And eventually, not showing it so long, you become accustomed to it. You know, you get used to it, just being in there. And I got into one fight. Well, really 2 fights. I got into a fight, which I took a nigga fade when I was in county jail, one of my mans. I took his fade. I heard of this thing called taking a nigga fade. That mean like you know what I mean? Like you certified on some shit, right? So it seemed like he didn't want to fight. because he had a cast, you know, on with this dude. So I took his fade, and after I took that fade, that word actually traveled a little bit of everywhere. Niggas knew that, you know, I'm a civilian. I'm not with nobody gang politics or anything like that, you know. But in the Bay Area, you know, that's Bay Area. We're not gangbangers. We're not, you know, we bang our, like, you know, our hoods and our projects and stuff like that. But we don't do like Red and, you know, Bloods and Crips and, you know, stuff like that. You know, but they do have what you call like a prison gang, you know, for that the Bay Area created that's in jail.